Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, for their continued support with this podcast. And this week we're going to Aberdeenshire and we're going to talk to Ken Howie from Cairnton. Ken, you're up there in Deeside.
Yeah, no. It's a glorious bit of countryside to live. It's not the best of farming country, but the views make up for it.
Indeed, it is a beautiful country. I've been up there and it's lovely. And Ken, I believe, we chatted last time I saw you was at Echt Show, and you were in a pair of shorts, to be fair. It was a cold day, so you must be hardened up to that weather.
Yeah, well, I tend to put them on in May, and I'm reluctant to take them off till October, but you're right, the day of Echt Show was almost changing my mind.
And am I right in thinking you are a nephew of Albert Howie, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Uncle Albert. Yeah, sadly lost him just a few months ago.
Yeah. Some character was Albert. He's been on this podcast as well. He's a great, interesting man.
Yeah. No, I know. Miss him a lot.
And I said you're there in the Dee Valley, which is near Bankery. What, you're about half an hour from Aberdeen, round about there?
Yeah. 30, 40 minutes to take you into town. Yeah.
And you run the Deeside. Well, this is a livestock podcast, so we'll go on to your livestock exploits in a minute or two. But let's just have a talk about your main job, your main business there. You run the Deeside Activity Park, and boy, does some sort of activity you get on with there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it started off really just as clay shooting was the one thing. Quite a keen clay shot, and started off offering clay shooting, and we still do quite a bit of that. And then over the years, we've just expanded the range. So we've got a fishing log here. We've got a kart racing circuit. We do archery, target shooting, axe throwing, and a whole host of sort of team building exercises to support the oil industry that was huge in Aberdeen. Getting a bit of a beating just now, of course, but our main stock and trade over the last few years has been almost entirely because of the oil industry in the northeast of Scotland here.
Sure. And I mean, that's, we'll maybe go on to the farm side of it in a minute, but I mean, that's just a fantastic example of how diversification sort of is farming has gone down that route to take the money from the general public there. Ken, and what's your background originally?
I mean, that's very true. There's a lot of guys have diversified in this part of Aberdeenshire, at least. As I say, we're not really in the best of farming country, but we're in pretty good too, I suppose. And some guys have gone B&B or caravan parks or whatever, and we just because the shooting was my interest, then it seemed to be an obvious.
And you still run the shooting there, and is that a shooting school that you run there? You have instructors, and my son's big into his clay shooting there. You listen to this, he'll be on the train straight away. But you do instruction there as well with the clay shooting.
Yeah. Most of it is instruction. In fact, if I'm honest, we probably discourage the folks just coming for a practice shot. And
have you put top gunshots towards competitions and such like? And yourself, are you a competition shooter?
Oh, I'm too old for that now. But there was a time when I used to have a go.
And as I said, the ultimate in diversification there with a shooting school, and I had a look at your website there, a Deeside Activity Centre. Anybody wants to look it up there. And you've got cycling, you've got archery and fly fishing, and you're quite keen on your fly fishing, I think, Ken.
No, absolutely, yeah. Well, in fact, I was away last week up in the north of Scotland, up in Sutherland. I was invited up to fish there. It was a glorious country, and it was fantastic. And right on our doorstep here, we've got the Dee, which at least was one of the finest salmon fly waters in the world. It's been a little disappointing this last few years, but I occasionally have a day or two on there too. So again, we're right in the middle of it, so it would seem foolish not to take the opportunity to try it.
I'm waiting for my invite here, Ken. I'm waiting for my invite. I hope it's in the post.
See what I can do.
and I mentioned, by the way, was your fly fishing trip, was that successful? Did you bring a few salmon back with you?
Well, no, I didn't. We amazingly, although it poured and rained in Aberdeenshire, it didn't rain at all in Sutherland, and so a serious lack of water. So although we saw lots of fish, we didn't catch any salmon. So we had a couple of days on a wee hill loch, and it was just fantastic catching these bonny wee trouts that we fried up for supper. So it was a bit of a change, but sorry, no salmon on the menu this time.
Sounds like my idea of heaven, catching a few trouts on the lock there. And yes, again, as I said, something I've always looked forward to doing. And go to the kart racing. That seems to have become quite a big business for you now. The go-karts and that. Is that something that you've been involved in as well? Did you fit in one of those karts and go herring around the track, giving them all a hard time?
Well, there was a time, yeah, and yeah, it's probably the most popular activity we do now. The guys are up there just setting up for a group coming in later this morning, and there's regular bookings come in for that side of things. It's something that all the family can do, from 8 years old upwards. So it's a very popular one, yeah.
Yeah, excellent, and a bit of hill trekking, various things, and you mentioned axe throwing. How's your axe throwing there? You made the team yet?
Well, interestingly enough, I saw it first at the Highland Show. I don't know how many years ago, and I thought we could perhaps do that, and we did a risk assessment on it because we've got to do that for all our corporate clients. And amazingly, despite the axes being bloody sharp, we found it was pretty safe. And touch wood, we've never had any issues. So it's again, it's pretty popular. It's not much on a standalone, but lots of people will do it as part of a kind of multi-activity day.
Sure, and you mentioned team building there, and obviously with the corporate side of it, and I imagine that's a big part of your business, a big part of a lot of people's business now, to send so the companies send a group of their employees across to you in a team building exercise, and they all bond a little bit. Is that what it's about?
Yeah, no, and it's easy to scoff about it really, but it actually really works very well, and it's quite interesting to see these diverse groups of people, because the oil industry is a global thing, and we'll have guys from Africa and Malaysia and Australia and the States and Norway and God knows where, all in one group, and they spend a few hours with us, and amazingly they've bonded surprisingly well. So it really works quite well, and it's usually a very important part of the business we do here.
Sure, and you've got a restaurant there and a farm shop, and we'll go on to the farming side of it in a second. But I mean, you've got a lot of things going on there. Big function room, I think. A lot of staff, Ken, as well. How's the staff? How are you finding that, getting the staff?
Yeah, well, for the activity side of things, we're very lucky. We've got a very loyal team of staff. Some of us have been here quite a long time. If I'm honest, we're all getting a little bit old, but we've got a good team of guys here. Just about 2 years ago, we actually gave up the restaurant and the farm shop and leased it to a third party on site. So we're no longer involved in the day-to-day running in that. But at the time, staffing was a problem, particularly in the immediate aftermath of COVID. And it is one less headache for us not having to run that side of things. But we run very closely together. But we're not involved in the day-to-day and the kind of nitty-gritty of it.
Okay, and I'm saying, the farm shop side of it, do they still source locally? I mean, the whole farm shop business across the UK now is becoming a massive
they do. They do. I mean, we used to process quite a lot of our own beef, and we have butchery on site, all the rest of it. But the reality of it was that we couldn't see that there was any money at it. And when we handed the business over to when we handed the catering business over to these people, it was a great opportunity just to stop doing that, and just put a line in the sand at that point. So we no longer do that either.
No, okay.
I really admire these people who do this sort of thing locally, but there are other guys who do it, but they're younger and fitter. And I remember when we were daft enough, and we would do those sort of things too.
Indeed. You tried a fair few things over the years, I'm sure, and then you stick with the ones that pay the bills, and you run holiday cottages there as well. That's another thing diversification is going into nowadays.
Yeah, well, we converted some of the old farm setting. I mean, Cairnton, pretty old farm. Steading dates back to 1882. Right. So, with modern machines, and it was getting increasingly difficult. So, what do you do with these old buildings? Do you knock them down, or do you sell them for development, or do you try and do something practical with them? And at that time, this is in the sort of 2008, 2009 time, there was a dearth of good quality self-catering accommodation on Deeside, and so that's what we did. So we spent a lot of money doing up those three properties, and they've become a really valuable addition to the operating business of the farm.
Okay. And were you tied a little bit with building regulations, with getting planning permission and all that, or were they fairly
Yeah.
amenable to letting you turn? Because a lot of people listen to this podcast are all thinking that leasehold buildings got to be turned.
Yeah, the planning process was actually okay. It was a little bit restrictive. We would have liked to increase perhaps some of the footprint, but we weren't actually allowed to do that, and we had to build within the footprint that was already there. We had to use the existing materials, so we couldn't use breeze block walls and harden them. We had to use the existing stonework, and we had to rebuild a lot of walls, and there was some really skilled kind of stonemason guys working on site. And we're really pleased with what we got, but it probably cost at least 30-40% more than it should have done.
Yeah, I know all about that. I've been in that trade myself, and but they do look very nice there. And Cairnton Farm Lodges, we'll give them a shout as well. I think that's what or farm cottages that you call that there. And I noticed you've got ties to a distillery there somewhere, or somebody's got ties to a distillery. Do you own a distillery as well, Ken?
Yeah. Well, so at the activity park, although it was at first a diversification from the farm, what we found now that it itself has diversified, and we've got about 15 commercial tenants on site, and one of which is the Lost Loch Distillery. It's amazing business. They make mainly white spirits, so gin, vodka. Well, they make rum too. Actually, they make a lot of rum, and but they don't make whiskey. It's what they'd like to do at some point in the future, but they've never just quite got around to it. It's a long lead-in time and all the difficulties with making whiskey. But
sure.
So it's quite. I'm just sitting in my office looking across at it now. Actually, it's quite nice to have a distillery this close at hand.
It sounds like a dream place for all of us. You've got a kart racing track outside. You've got fly fishing on your doorstep. You've got a distillery next door. And just tell us about the Lost Loch. I believe the Lost Loch is actually a loch there that was drained. Is that right? Is that what they called it for?
Aye. Well, again, it's if I just look a little over to my left, over to the west here, that's the Loch of Achlosson, which will be in some of the old maps. It was drained in the 1860s by the railway company when the railway came in from Aberdeen heading up towards Ballater, and it was always a pretty shallow kind of loch. So in the winter it's swelled, and in the summer it shrunk a bit, but it presented a risk to the railway line. So they drained it pretty fully. And then during the last war in the 1940s, the Ministry of Food came along and they made a really good job of draining it more fully. And after the war, it was kind of distributed to each of the farmers around about us. And it's a really fertile, deep bit of ground. But it is regressing a little bit just now. It's getting wet, it's getting boggy, it's getting rushy, and it's becoming a bit of a wildlife haven as opposed to a productive bit of farmland.
Again, something that the wildlife haven, of course, something that you'll put your customers towards. And this summer being such a wet summer as well. I mean, we talked about it before. You said it's still deep morning there in Aberdeen, and surprised it hasn't filled the lock back up again, actually, with the amount of rain we've seen this year. But how's that affected the trade up there? I mean, does the weather put people off, or do they go to Aberdeenshire with a raincoat anyway?
I mean, you're right. So where we are here, we're in a bit of a rain shadow, and our average rainfall is actually only 29 inches, which I think is the same as Kent. Okay. So we're in a really dry spot here anyway. And if I'm honest, in a dry year, a lot of our kind of fields will burn off, and we could do with that bit of extra rain. But I'll tell you this: last year, from about the 8th of October to the end of the year, we had 39 inches. So we had 30% more than a year's worth in just 3 months last year. And the loch filled up in October, and it really didn't. It's only just recently that it's back to where we'd expect it again. So, in terms of trade, it definitely has an effect. Particularly right now. I mean, here we are in the end of July, we're in the middle of school holidays. So at this time of year, we've got less corporate work, do a lot of families, and they tend to wake up in the morning, look at the forecast on their phones, and then make a decision from there. So if the forecast looks shit, they won't come. If the forecast looks good, they might come.
Okay, I suppose that's at least you got a chance that they will on the drier weather you've got there. And I know you're up near Balmoral and a lot of other things around that area as well. But let's just go on to the cattle. Let's go on to the farm first. Cairnton Farm, you said it's not great farming land, you said just now. But I mean, how big is Cairnton, and what does it do apart from, we'll go on to the cattle in a second, but you got arable there as well?
Yeah, a little. It's not a big farm, and that's why we kind of had to diversify in the early days. Interestingly enough, in 2003 when we opened the activity park as is now, we always said it was there to sort of help the farm along. But I will tell you this: in 2016, when the oil industry had a bit of a crash locally, and the oil guys, when things are good, yes, they spend money with us, but when things are bad, they just cut us off at the legs, and we went through a bit of a cash crisis at that time. We had a reduction sale of cows just to inject a bit of cash into this business, and I remember at the time thinking, the activity park was really there to make life easy for the farm. But when the shit hit the fan, it was the farm and, more importantly, the cows that were there to support the activity park. So I'm a great believer in cows as a kind of store of wealth and cash. You can turn them into money anytime you like.
Sure enough. And let's go on to the cows then. The Cairnton herd of Aberdeen Angus has been going on. When did it start? I know you won herd of the year back in the 90s. So how long has the Angus cows been there?
Yeah. So we bought Cairnton in 1989, and we almost immediately started with some cows, which went back to the Deesisde dispersal, which is just a few years previous to that.
Oh, okay.
And we were kind of lucky. We had Henry Durward just on our doorstep, and Henry and along with Neil Massey acted as advisors to us at that time. Henry was completely unbiased. Neil was less biased, less unbiased. But we were real lucky in that. In fact, when Margaret and I got married, Neil Massey gave us some semen for our wedding present. So not sure what he was getting at there, but so we started off with those cows. In fact, I think the first cow was Estella of Deeside. She was a grumpy bitch. I think she put Margaret over a fence once, but in the main, she did us quite well. And maybe just 3 or 4 years ago, we had a champion heifer at Stirling, sold to Owen Tunney down in Cheshire, $7,500 for her, and she would have gone back, Elizabeth, she would have gone back to that original cow, Estella of Deeside. And then, of course, we weren't going to get far along the way unless we bought something from Blalock. I remember buying a cow, Blackbird P70, out of Perth, Blackbird of Blalock, and we still have that Blackbird family in the farm, and really, quite successful all this time, actually. And then I suppose our next kind of major purchase was bought some cattle from Wedderley, particularly the Charisma family. We still have Charismas on the farm yet, and they all go back to that same batch that came from Wedderley. And the Wedderley guys, both John and Marion and Wanda too, have been really supportive and helpful kind of all this time.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you've mentioned some names of the who's who in the breed, really. But just going back to Henry Durward, I was fortunate enough to know Henry as well, and what a lovely, quiet and calm man he was. But of course, the Deeside herd was very much his, or a lot of it was very much his doing. I know there were people there before him, but Deeside herd, of course, owned by Lady McRobert at Tarlan, which is not too far up the road from you, I don't think. And the McRobert family with the Deeside, with Angus and with Highlanders, actually, were very, very successful through the halcyon years in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, that was kind of before my time, but you're right. Back in the sort of mid 60s, Deeside was the go-to herd if you wanted a stock bull, and as you say, Henry Durward was right in the thick of it during all that time. But he wasn't a boastful man. He was a very quiet, calm sort of guy, and we're very glad to have his advice on occasion. So he's a bit of a sad loss to the breed as well. I mean, you mentioned Lady McRobert there, as you say, the Aberdeen Angus and the Highlanders, but also they had a herd of Frisian cows as well. And I remember going there as a small boy. And it was quite an impressive setup, really.
Phenomenal. And going back to, I mean, as you'll know, I'll probably give a plug in a minute that I've been involved in right in the history of the Aberdeen Angus. And going back to those early cattle, You said you bought cattle from Deeside, dispersal in the middle late 80s. Those cattle then, of course, they would have come from very small origins. And I assume Deeside, like everybody else, was starting to go uphill and get the cattle bigger. But you would have had they wouldn't be very big, your first Angus, if they came from Deeside?
No, they weren't very tall, but they were very, very deep cows, and with a great deal of breed character and beautiful heads and lugs on them. But you're right. We appreciated the early 90s were a pretty exciting time within the Angus breed, because through this, from about 72 through to the end of the 80s, you could hardly give away Aberdeen Angus bulls. They went through a really bad time. And I remember when we kind of started, quite a few of my family were saying, "What the hell are you doing getting involved in that bloody breed?" But you see what's happened over the last 30 years, and they're now the dominant breed in the UK. And at the time, I basically looked at the rest of the world and I thought, well, the Angus is the dominant breed in the world. There's no way that's not going to happen here. But Neil Massey at that time he was importing a lot of Canadian bulls. Some of them weren't very pretty, but they were tall and big and lean, and we were lucky enough to borrow. Well, first of all, GV Jag. He was a very influential bull, and he was as tall as could be and as long as a bus. And it's only recently, I suppose, that you won't find him in some of the kind of more immediate pedigrees of our cows. And then we had a season of Royal Storm and Norman. Again, another Canadian bull, did fantastically well at Blalock, and we had him here for a season and did us really well. And again, he was a great, big, tall, long bull. And we appreciated it. We understood, I think, that we had to get that kind of size into them. And we've kind of maintained that right through. For a little while, they went too extreme and they weren't very pretty, but we're back to a kind of slightly larger than moderate cow now, and that's what we want.
And I think when I had the chat to you when we last met a few weeks ago, and you said some of the Angus are starting to get a wee bit smaller again, following the trends of the USA and what have you. But you've maintained that you've still got the size in your cows, which you can always take them down if you want to. But you've always kept that size, and that's an Aberdeenshire thing, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I mean, I was at New Deal show just at the weekend there, and goodness me, what a great display of cattle. A quick look through the commercial lines too, and there was a smattering of Angus in there, along with the usual suspects of Limousin and Blue and Charolais. But we lose our size at our peril, and it's the easiest thing on earth to get them smaller. It's really much more difficult to get the size back into them. Mm-hmm. Our current stock bull is a rules mains bull from Andrew Hodge there, and he looks like one of those Canadian bulls. He's tall and he's long, but he's got a bit of style and character to him, and a fantastic head too. So my grandfather used to say, "You buy your bull in bits," and I think that's right. You never get the full package in one. You've got to buy him in bits, and that's what we're doing.
Well, and he's doing you a good job.
Actually, my daughter, she bought him. She was sent off to the bull sales last year in February, and told to buy a bull or look out a bull at least, and in the wholesale yard, she came back and she said, "No, I don't. There's not really something I want here." Andrew and his family, daughter Emma, had mentioned that they had a bull at home that had hurted his foot or something like that, and Nicola went down to have a look at him and came home with him. So we have his first calves on the ground now, and they really are a very smart and even bunch of calves. And some people might accuse them of being a bit leggy, but I think that's a good thing, and you want a bit of leg in them.
Okay. And how many cows are you running there? Angus cows are you running there now, Ken?
Yeah, well, we've had a bit of a blip. So I mean, we're as small as we've ever been now. We're down to about a dozen, but we're starting increasing again. Nicola came home with a view of doing something with sheep, but we'll never get back to the numbers we were once at. We'll probably stick with a much smaller number and try and be more selective than ever before.
Okay, we'll go on to your sheep venture in a second, but I suppose from our earlier conversation here, when you're saying you're bringing in the general public into activities, the farm plays a big part of that, doesn't it? I mean, you do farm tours, you get people, get the general public in to see the animals and to get some understanding, and that's all about education, isn't it? That's the great thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, everything we do is we're in the entertainment business, really, and it's important we never forget that. And it's the same with a farm too. No one wants to be bored. So we have to kind of keep it fun. But yes, it's a grand opportunity to get the general public onto the farm. I particularly enjoy the fantastic history that we have in the Aberdeen Angus breed, and of course it's Tillyfoor is just 3 or 4 miles over the hill from where we are. We're splat bang in the middle of where it all happened, so that's a great thing here, and we're in lovely countryside, and so it's an easy story to tell, again, that's quite an important, because we're a relatively small farm. The holiday cottages, the wind turbine, the biomass, and the farm tours all contribute into the financial pot and make it more bearable than it might be otherwise.
And you continue that? Obviously, the farm cottages will continue all year round. Do you get people coming there in the winter, trudging through the snow and having a look at the cattle and the animals, or is this just purely seasonal?
Yeah, the tours tend to be a bit more seasonal. But the holiday lets, I think we're probably already let for Christmas, New Year, and during the winter time we have some shooting parties come in. So again, we're in some great shooting country in this part of Aberdeenshire. So that's quite useful. And increasingly, folk don't take 2 weeks in the sun in summer. They tend to take a long weekend here or a short break here, there, or whatever. And as long as we're reasonably flexible with our letting, then we can keep the occupancy reasonably well.
Sure, well, certainly. I don't think anybody will get bored when they came there. That's for certain. No matter what time of the year there, it sounds like my dream holiday, I must admit. And I said a lot more people listening to this. And just go on to the sheep. Then you got involved in Texels. How long have you been in that trade?
Well, that's not my business. Is nothing to do with Margaret or myself. It's entirely our daughter Nicola and her boyfriend David. They started about 2 years ago, I suppose. Bought some pretty interesting genetics, and lamb sales. Well, in the next few weeks, actually, I suppose they'll have top lambs forward to Lanark. And not that I know bugger all about sheep, but they look pretty smart to me, and I really hope they have a bit of success on their first outing. David's a bit of experience in the sheep world, but Nicola's pretty new to it. But they're certainly very enthusiastic about it anyway.
That's brilliant to hear that they're going into a different direction, and as I said, that their own doing if it's something that you're not involved in. But it sounds like they bought some fairly decent ewes if they got lambs good enough to get to Lanark this year. And of course, Lanark, as you said, coming up there in a difficult world, that Texel world. There, I wish them the very best with that one.
But Nicola, we've been very lucky with Nicola. She was quite enthusiastic, quite involved in the showing side of things with myself, and then she had the great opportunity when Graham Massey dispersed at Brallock. He gave Nicola the opportunity to dress all the cattle, which was pretty hard work, and there was a few tears involved. But once she'd done it, it was a great achievement, and of course it was a fantastic sale. And since then, she's dressed quite a lot of cattle for other people. She won the Aberdeen Angus Cattle Society YDP Youth Development thing 2 or 3 years ago. And she certainly makes a much better job of dressing cattle than I ever did. So that's quite useful too.
Good, brilliant. All good on her. Now I know I see her name about a lot of the time, and I said wish her well on that too. And one other person I suppose I should mention in your part of the world there is if we talk about Aberdeen Angus in Aberdeenshire, of course, is Eddie Galanders, and you and Eddie will be quite thick together. Eddie's just retired now, but what a great stalwart he's been for the breed.
Ed, quite apart from his journalistic career, he was the secretary of our local Aberdeen Angus Breeders Club for 40 years. And I suppose, to my list of Henry Durward and Neil Massey, I should add Eddie Galanders to that as well, because he was always very supportive and kind of family feel. And again, back in the 90s, there was a lot of new started herds around about that time. Ourselves and Hamish Slater up at Dunlugus and Watties, Tonley were just newly started, and there were quite a few others. Some of us are still here now, and at that time it was quite an exciting time. I mean, the breed was on the up. We'd a kind of family feel around about this here, and in Aberdeenshire here, we're just a little bit further away than all the rest. We always feel that those guys in the borders, they catch all the customers on the way south, and there's very few of them manage to get to make their way up at Aberdeenshire. But those that do buy a bull out of Aberdeenshire generally are quite successful, and I would urge them to take that extra couple of hours journey just a little bit further north.
Well, I certainly, you got me tempted to come up there. I don't even need a bull, but you got me tempted to come up and have a look, because it is a beautiful part of the world, as you said there, and a great herd of Angus that you have, and you'll have bulls for Stirling again this year. Have you got some youngsters coming on that'll be in the limelight maybe?
Well, we're trying to change things so that we no longer rely on the October sale, but February sale we think should be something a bit more special, and we've got a couple of bulls and a heifer that we're thinking will be going there. Over the years, the Perth Stirling bull sales now is less of an event than it used to be, and there are moves afoot amongst some of the members and within the society to try and make the bull sale, or at least the February bull sale, a bit more of an event. I suppose COVID really, knocked it on the head finally, and we've struggled really to get any traction to get it going again. So we're going to try and make a bit more of an event of it, and try to encourage more past customers, past buyers, and other breeders to make that little bit of effort to come to Stirling and really make it more of a well, as I say, just an event than just another bull sale. So we understand, I appreciate there's a lot of bulls being sold at home, and even for those that are very successful at selling them at home, we try and encourage them to keep back, maybe a couple of their best ones and put them forward to Stirling and really make it an event that a must-attend event.
Okay, and it has been a must-attend event for 200 years or 100 and odd years, hasn't it, at the old Perth Mart, and some history that goes with it, and it's great to see that is still going. But you are right, there are people now that can sell younger bulls at home with a regular clientele, and maybe doesn't get all the best bulls turning up there. So hopefully, if that can turn a little bit, that's got to be a good thing. Got to be a good thing.
See, you and I remember even the new Perth Mart, just the market, but the whole town. The move to Stirling was a little bit of an upset, and then, as I say, of course, COVID just knocked any of us go down to Stirling. We make our own fun, but we have the feeling that there should be something, some sort of social gathering, and importantly, those guys that do well. And I remember a few years ago we won the 3, which is the Clash Facher Trophy, and this no one ever gets to see it. So there should be an event, prize giving, where the membership get to see this beautiful trophy and get to see it hand over to the guy that's put all the work into, or the people who put the work into making this happen. So we're hopeful that this is going to happen this next year in Stirling 25.
Well, I'll definitely look forward to being there myself for that one. And as you know, we've written a history of the Angus book as well now. So that one, www.angushistorybook.com. Those of you want to go and have a wee look at that. But I've appreciated the time that I've spent involved in the Angus, and also more recently with the research that I've done going back all over those years. So it's a great read to be associated with, and it's a pleasure. A pleasure to be involved.
Yeah, no. I'm so looking forward to in your book, but the history is fantastic. I remember went to Argentina back in 2001, I think it was, and it was fantastic going to these estancias. Most of them were very proud of the fact that their foundation stock had come from Scotland, and most of them could recount that it had come from Pitfour or Tillyfour or wherever, we lose that historical connection at our pedal. So I'm really pleased that you've taken the initiative to write a book and sort of update it a bit.
Okay, brilliant. Well, Ken, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I always enjoy your company, and I wish you well with the summer, and hopefully the sun starts to shine a little bit and help the business along there. And if we don't see you before, we'll catch up with you at that bull sale there in February. And Aberdeen Angus people listening out there, a bit more of an event going on this time there. Even if you're not needing a bull, get yourself up to Stirling in February, and let's make an event of it.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I really enjoyed Top Lines and Tails. I never thought I'd actually be the guy that was on the other end of the line, so I appreciate it very much.
It's great to have you on there, Ken. All the very best. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, for their continued support with the Top Lines and Tails podcast. And although there's plenty of grass around just now, it's time to start thinking about creep feeding calves to start to take the pressure off those cows as they head towards weaning time. So creep feeding, of course, is a great way to minimise the weaning check and also take advantage of that inbuilt efficiency of young calves. So get in touch with Harborough and find out how they can help you with a range of creep feed options. And get in touch with your local Harborough representative or find them on the internet or on social media and various other places where you can catch up with that great team there of specialists at Harborough. And while you're on the internet, don't forget to join in our Top Lines and Tails Facebook community, where you'll find information about this and other episodes and pictures and general chit-chat all around the livestock industry that we all like to be together in one big community. So check out our Facebook page there, and thanks very much again for being a listener of Top Lines and Tails.